This is a scene from a well-known medieval movie. Hundreds of arrows set ablaze, soaring through the night sky like a fiery storm raining down on a fortress. It's visually stunning and terrifying, and also very familiar. We've seen this image over and over again in movies, games, and even in how we imagine medieval warfare. But did it actually happen? Did real medieval armies use flaming arrows as part of their battlefield tactics? Or is it just a cinematic trick designed for drama? In today's video, we're going to uncover the truth. Flaming arrows, those dazzling, mysterious weapons, did they really exist in battle? Or are they purely a product of film? The idea of shooting a flaming arrow didn't originate in Hollywood. In fact, it dates back thousands of years. Ancient sources show that the Greeks, Romans, and especially the Chinese dynasties used fire arrows not to kill people, but to set fire to flammable targets like straw roofs, wooden watchtowers, or ships. In ancient China, records describe fire arrows launched from large crossbows. The arrowheads were wrapped in cloth soaked in oil or resin and lit just before firing. The Byzantines and Arabs also employed similar techniques. During the medieval period in Europe, flaming arrows weren't as common as the movies suggest, but they did exist. Historical accounts from sieges like Chateau Gaillard or Acre mention fire arrows used to burn supply depots, tents, or to sow chaos among enemy ranks. But even if they were real, flaming arrows were far from simple to use. The question is, how effective were they really? In the movies, a fire arrow flies far, blazes brightly, and ignites anything it touches. In reality, it's a lot more complicated. First, there's the issue of weight. When you wrap an arrow in cloth, soak it in oil or pitch and set it on fire, it gets heavier. That makes it fly slower, lower, and far less accurately. Archers had to move closer to their targets, making them easier targets in return. Then there's fire itself, unpredictable and unreliable. A burning arrow could easily be snuffed out by the wind before it ever reached its mark. If you've ever tried lighting a fire in damp weather, you know it doesn't always go as planned. Next, there's the danger factor. Lighting arrows right before shooting takes time, and it's extremely risky. On a chaotic battlefield, moving around open flames while carrying bundles of flammable arrows isn't exactly safe. A misstep or a gust of wind and your entire archery squad could go up in smoke. And finally, don't forget, most medieval fortresses were made of stone. Stone doesn't burn. So, even if fire arrows worked, they were only effective against targets made of wood, cloth, straw, or oil, things not always conveniently available on the battlefield. In short, from a technical perspective, fire arrows were a hassle to use. Which brings up another question. If they were such a pain, why use them at all? The truth is fire arrows weren't designed to kill. They weren't accurate or powerful enough to pierce armor or shields. But they were incredibly useful in other ways, especially for causing panic and destruction. During sieges, when enemies were clustered inside fortresses, setting fire to straw roofs, warehouses, tents, or wooden towers could create serious chaos. Flames forced defenders to split up to put out fires, disrupted their defenses, or simply spread fear. In some rare cases, fire arrows were used to burn down wooden bridges ships or siege engines, stationary, flammable targets where success was more likely. Some armies even used them as psychological weapons. In the dead of night, a volley of blazing arrows arching overhead could terrify soldiers, crush morale, and make them feel like hell itself was raining down. However, once defenders were well prepared, the effectiveness of fire arrows dropped sharply. Fortresses could be built to resist fire with tiled roofs, clay-coated walls, and water wells inside the walls. Defenders often carried buckets of water-soaked cloths, even animal hides, to smother fires before they could spread. So while fire arrows could be useful in specific pre-planned situations, they were never the ultimate weapon that Hollywood often makes them out to be. They were a supporting tool, not a main battle tactic. In movies, flaming arrows have become almost a trademark of medieval warfare. They fly far, burn brightly, and seem to set everything ablaze. A rain of fire often kicks off the big battle scene, giving us thrilling visuals and building dramatic tension. But in real history, that image rarely, if ever, actually happened. Yes, historical records mention flaming arrows, but there's no evidence they were used in large-scale barrages like we see in films. No battle on record ever began with thousands of flaming arrows lighting up the night sky. And the reason is simple. It was too much effort, too much risk, and not very effective militarily. To create the kind of firestorm we see on screen, you'd need hundreds of well-trained archers, all using the right kind of arrows, all lighting them simultaneously and shooting in perfect coordination at a flammable target. It's a beautiful setup for a movie, but not something that would realistically work in a battlefield full of chaos, shifting weather, and constant pressure. So why do movies keep using it? Because it looks amazing, and it stirs emotion. A shower of fire across the sky evokes awe, fear, and symbolism. It doesn't need to be historically accurate. It just needs to create a moment we'll remember. Like many things in epic cinema, flaming arrows are a mix of historical truth and screenwriters' imagination. So, did people really fight with flaming arrows? The answer is yes. But very rarely. Flaming arrows did exist, and they were used in specific situations, mainly during sieges when the targets were wooden structures, storage areas, temporary camps, or ships. They weren't a primary killing weapon, and they weren't used on a massive scale like we often see on screen. Because of technical limits, weather danger, and low effectiveness, flaming arrows were more of an opportunistic tactic than a go-to strategy. Kind of like early armored cars in World War I, or leaflet-dropping planes, real things, but only useful in very particular circumstances. What's interesting is it's precisely because fire arrows were rare, difficult to use, and somewhat symbolic that they've become such an iconic image in modern imagination. They've become a symbol of medieval warfare, not because they were common, but because they're dramatic, dangerous and timeless. Flaming arrows, brilliant, evocative, real, but nothing like what we usually see on screen. Not a main weapon. Not a divine storm that opened every battle. Just a tool used quietly in a handful of very specific moments, then gone.